What is going on, everybody? Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, the show that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn, and we are back for episode 2 of this second season of the show, the rebirth, if you will. I am so excited to be back on the mic, talking music with everybody, and I am so grateful for the awesome feedback we got on last week's 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, the music edition playlist. That one was a lot of fun. And like I said, there are well over a year's worth of different playlist ideas that you, the fellow mixtapers, have sent in to me, sitting on this online randomizer for me. And I am once again going to spin the wheel and see what tonight's topic is. But before I do that, if you want to submit an idea for a future My Weekly Mixtape episode, be sure to hit me up, myweeklymixtape@gmail.com, or on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. Send in your suggestions and I will add them to this list. They can be serious, they can be fun, they could be absurd, whatever you've got. I am going to take your suggestions and try to turn them into a serviceable playlist. So without wasting any time, let's spin the wheel and see what this week's topic is going to be. All right, something I know a little something about. Patreon mixtaper Cactus Pete chimed in with best hit songs redone acoustically. Now, anyone that knows Colburn and Company, I've been doing that for over 10 years now, obviously doing my solo stuff acoustically since around 2007, almost on 20 years now. I love acoustic remakes and acoustic reimaginings of songs, so this is going to be an extremely fun topic for me. Now, instinctively, I know my mind is going to immediately go to all of the Colburn and Company staples, all the songs we play show after show, but I'm going to try to stay away from some of those because a lot of those songs, while we remade them acoustically, some of the bands haven't. And in some instances, they have. And I'm definitely going to work a couple in there because they're just too good to not. But that being said, Cactus Pete's example was Bon Jovi's acoustic take of Something for the Pain. If you haven't seen that, look it up on YouTube. It is an incredible version with some amazing live harmonies. I mean, this is Bon Jovi. I don't know if it was quite at the 80s peak, but they were still at the top of their game at this point. Definitely worth taking the time to check out. Something for the Pain is easily a top 10 Bon Jovi song for me, so I love that he went with that one. And I should also take this opportunity to thank Pete for being such an awesome part of the Patreon mixtaper community, which you can find over at patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. You can sign up for free. There are different tiers there that help support the show, but none of that is required. I just appreciate the support and staying in touch with the other fellow mixtapers. Once again, if you want to do that, it's patreon.com/My Weekly Mixtape. So now I am going to take a long, hard dive into acoustic remakes and reimaginings. And what I'm going to do is actually pull up my Apple Music playlist because, not to cheat, I have a ton of acoustic versions from my years in radio, some of which are not officially released, and some of them immediately come to my mind. So I want to make sure I'm looking at the cloud status, and if I see uploaded, that means there's a good chance it's not on streaming. And there are a few that I might put a little pin in to talk about later on because some of these you definitely need to look up, even if it's just on YouTube. I'm going to do my absolute best, though, to keep this playlist to songs that you can find on all your favorite streaming sites, so that way you can kind of play along at home as you're listening to the podcast. So as I'm scrolling through my acoustic playlist here, some things that are immediately coming to mind. I want to try to find versions of songs that really lean heavily into the quote-unquote remake or reimagining aspect of the playlist, because you think about any MTV Unplugged show from the 90s especially, but even into the 2000s, certain songs are just the originals done on acoustic guitar. I immediately think of About a Girl by Nirvana. You listen to the version on Bleach, and then you listen to the version that is on MTV Unplugged. Basically, it is a heavier song played acoustically with not much reimagining done to it. So as much as those are incredible, I want to try to come up with a list of songs that you could pair up against the original track, play them back to back, and get two completely different vibes, two completely different feelings, almost as if you're listening to two completely different songs, albeit by the same artist. And I think the first one that immediately jumps out to me, during the MTV Unplugged craze in the 90s, a lot of artists from my parents' era, the quote-unquote classic rock era, reinvented themselves in the 90s by having a hit moment via MTV Unplugged. Rod Stewart immediately comes to mind, Neil Young, Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, the Eagles, all of those happened. However, when you think about completely flipping a song on its side, the fact that this track on streaming starts with the words, "See if you could spot this one," I have to start this playlist with Eric Clapton's Layla from his Unplugged album and his MTV Unplugged special. That version is so far removed from the original Derek and the Dominoes version that it almost takes you a moment to realize what's happening. The crowd is behind. As the riff starts, you can hear the applause kind of roll into the song because it took that extra split second for them to figure out what song he was playing. And as somebody who had Derek and the Dominoes, Layla, and other assorted love songs playing in a heavy rotation growing up via my parents, one of my first CDs was Eric Clapton's Timepieces, which had Layla on it. Hearing it this way completely blew my mind because I knew the song, but I never heard it like this before. And this one really jumped out to me. And I really feel like it reintroduced Eric Clapton to the 90s generation, because here he was, one of these quote unquote classic rock acts, using the popularity of MTV at the time, which MTV is going away in a lot of countries right now. But during the 90s, MTV was the pulse of what was popular. And these classic rock acts used MTV Unplugged as a way to introduce themselves to a new generation who may not have been exposed to their music otherwise. The 90s were a really interesting time when you think about it, because there were people that would listen to just as much Neil Young as they would Pearl Jam. And then guess what happens? Pearl Jam and Neil Young come together to do an album together. There was a lot of cross-pollination of music, and MTV Unplugged played a huge part in it. But when you listen to the original version of Layla, and then you listen to what he did on the acoustic version, it is a complete remake of that song. You can play them back to back, and they feel like two separate pieces of music. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. Coming out of Eric Clapton, I do want to throw in one that Colburn and Company has been playing, actually both versions of, for well over a decade. There's the original hit from one of my favorite albums of the 90s, August and Everything After. And then there's the slowed down reimagining that you can find on Across the Wire live in New York City. But actually, I'm going to go with a different album, which is my personal favorite version of this song. It's from New Amsterdam, live at Heineken Music Hall. This one was released after I was married, so I want to say it was 2005 or 2006. Don't quote me on that. But it's Counting Crows and Rain King, a staple of their live set for many, many years. Season 1, there is an album dive on August and Everything After where I had the original Counting Crows drummer Steve Bowman on the show, and we actually talked about the fact that they played these two versions. And I don't want to spoil it now. Go back and check that episode out. But Rain King is this really upbeat, poppy Counting Crows song. But then you listen to the slowed down version that you get on either Across a Wire or New Amsterdam, and it's stripped down to a slower, drawn-out ballad. And you really get drawn into the lyrics of this version. And that's something that really resonates with me, especially when it comes to the Counting Crows. Adam's lyrics are such a huge part of what makes me love this band. And on the original, sure, I know all the words and I sing along with all of them. But when you listen to it slowed down, the lyrics really sink in and the song just becomes a different animal. And to me, that's where the quote unquote remake and reimagining comes into play. And I'll tell you, Eric Clapton into Counting Crows in the 90s, that's MTV right there. That's not even a jump musically, because in the 90s, like I said, classic rock artists were just as welcome on MTV as the up and coming artists. There was such a cross-pollination of it that I feel like that's something that gets lost now, because the only way cross-pollination in music happens now is if young people are getting exposed to these songs on TikTok, because TikTok is now, I hate to say it, your new MTV. But Rain King is such a classic Counting Crows song. And, you know, look, at the end of the slow versions, he doesn't do the yeah. So thank God for that, because I think that would kill it. Although we've done that a few times doing it live just to see if anybody was paying attention, and that always goes over well. But Rain King out of Layla to start this Acoustic Reimaginings playlist off. And now I'm in a real 90s mood here. And I could very easily just stay in the 90s MTV Unplugged and crank out a 10-song playlist that will make perfect sense here. But we'll see where that goes, because I have way too many songs in this playlist that I want to kind of branch out of the 90s a little bit. But for now, I'm going to stay here because I like where we're going right now. And I'm going to do something similar to Rain King, where I take an upbeat, faster song and slow it down. Only this time it's going to be a heavier, quote unquote, song that is stripped down to its core and made slow, where once again, you really have to pay attention to the lyrics. And the lyrics in this song stand out no matter what version you're listening to. Sorry, Dave Coulier, but we are going to go with Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know, originally from Jagged Little Pill. The live unplugged version is the version that you will find on streaming. Here is where I have to say streaming gets a thumbs down for me, and my physical media collection is the jackpot, because only available on the Ironic import CD single. Do those words make sense to anybody out there? Import CD single. Kids in the 90s, for some reason, overseas got CD singles that featured songs that you could not get on CD here in the US. And a lot of stores like Tower Records, Sam Goody Record Town had a small section of import CDs. And one of the ones that I immediately grabbed was the import CD single of Ironic, because one of the bonus tracks was Alanis's performance from the 38th Annual Grammy Awards. Now, it is very similar to the version on the Unplugged album, but there was something about the Grammy Awards performance that hit me the first time I heard it, and I never looked back from that version. It is so vulnerable. The lyrics on the original are vulnerable as it is, but when you hear her singing it in such a soft, mellow tone, the anger behind the lyrics and what she's saying just takes on a whole new meaning. The graphic nature of the lyrics stick out even more than they do on the original heavy version, because as much as I love the heavy version, you got Flea laying down that incredible bass line, but you're rocking out to the song. That is why it's one of her biggest hits. Yeah, you're paying attention to the lyrics, but when she's really taking it down to just a piano and her voice, you're forced to listen to the words and hear what she has to say. And you can play these two back to back and get two completely different versions, similar to Rain King, maybe even a step more because of the graphic nature of the song. But now that I've got the female contingent started on this playlist, I want to stay with that. And when I think about female acoustic performances in the 90s, you have to do a record scratch right at Heart's The Road Home. This is Ann and Nancy Wilson at their best. John Paul Jones produced this acoustic show for MTV. He plays bass on it. This is such an incredible moment in time. It sounds like a studio album done live. It is so perfect. The performance backed by the symphony orchestra behind the acoustic setting of the band. You had the dimly lit candles hanging around the stage, setting the scene, the carpeting on the ground. It felt like you were in this living room performance, sitting with them in front of you, giving you this moment in time that is just on a completely different level than anything you'd heard from them in the past. Now, mind you, this is a classic rock act that somehow reinvented themselves in the 80s with the teased up hair. They had enough Aquanet in their hair during the self-titled album and Bad Animals that could probably kill the ozone layer, but then they stripped it back down, and The Road Home took one of their biggest hits from the 80s, their take on I-10's Alone. Yes, Alone is a cover song. I've said this every time I've talked about this song on the podcast, but in case you haven't heard my spiel yet, the Cliff Notes version, it was originally recorded in the early 80s by I-10, and then Valerie Stevenson and John Stamos, yes, Uncle Jesse, recorded a version for a CBS show called Dreams. But then in 1987, on Bad Animals, Hart made the song theirs. However, that was the 80s power ballad version. And by 1995, power ballads were no longer the in sound. Not only were they not the in sound, they were almost mocked because of the whole Nirvana killed that hair band sound of the 80s. We're now in the 90s grunge movement era. And somehow Hart was able to take their sound, pulling songs from their 70s catalog and 80s catalog, and making them sound like they fit in with everything that was out in the 90s. Unplugged was still all the rage, and their version of Alone, again, this is probably the closest thing that I would say, yes, it's remade, not so much reimagined. It is slower than the power ballad version, but again, it's a focus on the vocals. Anne's vocals in this song make the hair on my arms stand up. It puts a lump in my throat. I mean, this is a powerful live performance. Her voice, this might be one of her all-time best live performances, and I'm putting that up against her version of Stairway to Heaven from the Kennedy Center Honors performance. This version of Alone is just on another level. Then you add the fact that John Paul Jones is walking his bass through the song, being a bass player, and Ramble On by Led Zeppelin being one of my favorite bass lines of all time. Hearing him work his magic in this song, just, oh my God, these two versions, I can listen to the Bad Animals version and the Road Home version back to back. Yes, they're similar, but they hit me in a different way. So I feel like this one deserves to be on this playlist. But because Alone is a cover song, I feel like I can dive into that well just one more time and add in a second cover song, but bring us into the modern era now. Because I have touched on a ton of 90s stuff, and I want to bring in some newer bands. Well, I mean, this band's been around for 20 plus years, but as far as I'm concerned, they're so friggin' underrated. This is one of those bands that I feel like should be on every Southern rock fan's radar. And if they aren't, it's a crime. I was blessed enough to have Paul Jackson on for an episode during season 1. And yes, I am talking about Blackberry Smoke. And I am going to go with their cover of, well, you know, it's my favorite artist of all time. And when a new band that I am fond of covers my favorite artist of all time, reimagines my favorite artist all time, and gives me goosebumps, it has to be included on this list. So following up Hearts Alone, I am going with Blackberry Smoke featuring Amanda Shires on violin and their cover of You Got Lucky from Tom Petty's Long After Dark album. You Got Lucky is a quintessential 80s Tom Petty song. Yet when I listen to Blackberry Smoke's version, if someone said to me, hey, this band just wrote and recorded this song in 2018, that was the year the Southern Ground Sessions came out, I would 100% believe you. They do such an incredible job on this song. And once again, it's a slowed down version. And it really makes you listen to the lyrics. and it really makes you listen to the melody. Amanda Shire's violin is so soothing. It just glides you through the song. And I don't want to give too much away because I want you to go back and listen to the Ultimate Blackberry Smoke playlist episode. But one spoiler out of 20 songs, we do talk about this song in that episode. And I would much rather you hear the story come out of Paul's mouth than mine because he lived it. I'm just enjoying every moment of it. That said, this is just one of those covers that I put it neck and neck with the original. Now, Tom Petty's my favorite artist of all time. So for me to say that, that's how absolutely incredible I think this version is. And if you haven't heard it, you owe it to yourself to press pause, not stop, press pause, and head over to myweeklymixtape.com to listen to this song right now because I have the playlist embedded on the episode page. And just for a recap, we started things off with Eric Clapton's Layla, Counting Crows' Rain King, Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know, Hearts Alone, and Blackberry Smoke's cover of Tom Petty's You Got Lucky. Once again, that playlist is embedded on the episode page over at myweeklymixtape.com. And with that, now I am going to start with the second half of this playlist. And I feel like, yes, I'm going to go back to the 90s, but we have to talk at least one of the big four of grunge. Because when you think about Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, and I'll stop myself in my tracks right there to say I understand that Soundgarden is part of the big four when you talk about Seattle grunge. However, Soundgarden never did an MTV Unplugged, so I am using Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Stone Temple Pilots in this big four scenario. However, those four bands, again, with no disrespect to Soundgarden, were all huge parts of the grunge scene as well as the Unplugged acoustic scene. I can choose one from any of those bands, and it easily will slide right in. I think the one I'm going to go with, though, was a bit of a reimagining again, because I'm trying to think, when I think about Alice in Chains Unplugged, as much as I love the performance on that album and Nirvana and Pearl Jam's Unplugged, they were faithful to the originals, played acoustically. However, when Stone Temple Pilots did Plush acoustically and slowed it down, and Scott Weiland's vocals layered over the DeLeo brothers' guitar work, it's just so sonic. There's so many layers in this simplistic version. It has more depth than the original because the distortion kind of brings everything to the center on the studio track. This one opens up and it feels like the band is sitting around you and surrounding you with the song. And the lyrics really just cut you when you listen to this. And it feels so vulnerable. And once again, I had to seek it out on an import CD single back in the 90s, long prior to the Thank You Greatest Hits compilation. You had to find it on the Sex Type Thing CD single. And I think that CD single at the time was well over $10, and it was only a couple tracks. But to me, worth every, now, apologize for the pun here, pretty penny I spent on it, because this version is truly one for the ages. So much so that I feel like I was validated when they included it on the Thank You compilation. Now, a lot of the songs I've been talking about tonight so far have been hits. And this next song I feel is a hit. But I feel like people that are outside of the heavier music community might not see this one as much of a hit. This might be to the mainstream audience the deep cut of my 10-song playlist, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I know there's a lot of people that listen to heavier music on here, and heavier music sometimes doesn't translate well acoustically. However, there is a band that I feel could easily be the most underrated. I'll include them in nu metal, although I consider them to be much more than that, from that genre as a whole. And that's going to be Sevendust. Lejean's vocals are something that should be studied. He can do the heaviest of heavy and take it down to something that pulls at your heartstrings. The guy's got a range unlike anything I've ever heard. And there's a reason why so many heavy bands look up to Sevendust. It's why when they're the opening band on the bill, people are packed in the house to see them. I have never seen Sevendust disappoint any audience in all the times I've seen them. Now, in 2004, they released an album, Southside Double Wide Acoustic Live. However, I'm going to jump a decade further and go with their Time Travelers and Bonfires album that they recorded in studio. It was a split album, all acoustic. It was 6 re-recorded songs and 6 brand new songs. The album was recorded at Architect Studios, which is up in North Jersey. That has nothing to do with this, but considering it's from my area, I'd like to point that out. And they closed the album with an incredible reimagining of the opening song from their self-titled album, Black. And when you listen to this version, yes, it's acoustic, but it is just as heavy as the original electric version, but it's heavy in a completely different way. The original makes you want to run through a wall. The version on Time Travelers and Bonfires cuts into your soul, and it is so powerful. You listen to them back to back. Obviously, the chorus, it's sang similarly, but it is 2 different vibes. And the fact that they were able to take this incredible song from their catalog and reimagine it the way that they did, I don't think I could do this playlist without talking about this song. So Time Travelers and Bonfires, if you're a fan of Sevendust and you haven't heard this album, you owe it to yourself to give it a full listen. Yes, it's not as heavy as what you expect from all their stuff, but if you're familiar with Southside Double Wide Acoustic Live, you already know that Sevendust can bring it acoustically just as heavy as they can do electric. Now, I've been staying kind of on this entire playlist from the 90s up. I want to dip back a little bit. I want to go back to the late 80s here. And we're going to stay heavy because when you have one of the biggest hard rock albums of the 80s come out in 1987, that's Appetite for Destruction, and you follow it up with a split EP, half live and half acoustic, GNR Lies, you have my attention. And the attention you have is when you take one of the heaviest songs on Appetite, You're Crazy, and you strip it down to a bluesy acoustic jam. It sounds like the band is sitting around a campfire, having a couple drinks, and just getting into a groove on a song that normally wouldn't groove the way it does on Appetite. Once again, bringing your attention to the lyrics. However, don't be fooled by the fact that it's slow and bluesy, because some of the high notes that Axl hits in that are just as electric as the version on Appetite for Destruction. And I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'll be curious if people agree with me or disagree with me. But I personally prefer the version on GNR Lies over the Appetite for Destruction version. Now, let me say this. The GNR Lies version does not belong on Appetite for Destruction. The version they have on that album is perfect for Appetite. But if you put the songs back to back, GNR Lies version for some reason just takes the cake for me. I'd be curious if you feel the same. So please keep this conversation going. myweeklymixtape@gmail.com or at myweeklymixtape on all the socials. Which version do you like better? And I'm sure a lot of people might lean towards Appetite. And honestly, I can't argue it. They're both incredible versions, but there's just something that's so raw. They're both raw. They really are. But there's something acoustically that makes it even more raw. It feels, the lyrics in it feel more guttural coming out of Axl on the version on Lies. Some of you might agree with me. Some of you might disagree with me. And this is one of those situations that I think no matter which side of the argument you stand on, we're all winners because both versions kick absolute ass. But you know what? I'm going to take it even a step further, and I'm going to throw a poll up on the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com. I want to know which version of You're Crazy the Mixtapers do prefer. Is it the version from Appetite for Destruction or GNR Lies? So head over to the episode page and throw a vote at the one you prefer more. Again, no right or wrong answers here because I love them both. But let's see what everyone else has to say. Now I'm scrolling through my playlist here because I'm trying to find, here it is. Okay. Like I said, I enjoy the GNR Lies version of You're Crazy more than the Appetite version. Not by much, but just edges it out. And here's another instance that happens for me. And the reason I had to look it up is because I couldn't tell you this EP's name off the top of my head. It's known as B-Sides from One by One, but I had to read it. It's called 000-20225. And I'm going to go with the Foo Fighters acoustic version of Times Like These. I understand that people love Times Like These as the fast version with Taylor Hawkins' incredible drums and the energy that song brings. The studio version on One by One rocks more. I'll never argue that. But Times Like These from this EP hits me harder in the feels. And this is one that I would love to know from Foo Fighter fans because Times Like These is one of the band's biggest hits. And this, along with Everlong, have been done fully acoustic and slow. And they've both been done in that half acoustic, half slow, half rock and half fast version where the two are kind of merged together. So I'd be very curious where Foo Fighters fans stand on this. I tend to lean more towards the acoustic one because the lyrics really grab and resonate with me more, but in zero disrespect to the rockin' version because of course I always want to rock out too. But for this playlist, I feel like this version fits in really, really well, coming out of the heavier side with Sevendust and GNR, and now we're bringing it back down a little bit. And you know what? Hopefully I remember to do all this by the time the episode launches. I'm going to put another poll on the episode page. I'll be curious which version of Times Like These you like better, the One by One version or the acoustic EP version. So I'll throw that up on there as well. Once again, that's myweeklymixtape.com in case you forgot the last 5 times I mentioned it. And now we're at the point to the last song of this playlist. And we talked about this artist before because we ended the first side with Blackberry Smoke's You Got Lucky. Did you really think I was going to do an acoustic remakes and reimaginings playlist and not include Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Learning to Fly from 2006's Bonnaroo performance that's featured on the live anthology? I talked about this song on the Spellbinding episode of season 1. This version makes the hair on my arm stand up every single time I hear it. Stevie Nicks with her majestic background vocals, slowing this fun and upbeat song down to almost a gospel nature. To me, it's the perfect way to close out this 10-song reimagining playlist. It's the opening track on Into the Great Wide Open, and it's the closing track on this acoustic remakes and reimaginings playlist. This version, the video is up on YouTube. And at the end, Tom is singing the chorus over and over again with the audience singing it back. And once the audience takes the chorus over, Tom starts riffing over the audience. And it is so beautiful. It is literally like Tom is preaching the gospel of music to this amazing audience. I had the chance on their Mojo tour to see this version performed live. My father and I went together, and I will never forget him and I being a part of that audience sing-along. It is one of the most beautiful live performances I have ever seen, up there with Grace Potter doing I Shall Be Released at the Love for Levon concert. This is something that if you haven't heard it, you need to, again, pause, don't hit stop, hit pause, and go listen to it, along with the rest of the songs we talked about, because all of them are embedded on the episode page over at myweeklymixtape.com. But now I'm going to take you through all the songs we've talked about on this 10-song playlist. We had Eric Clapton's Layla, Counting Crows' Rain King, Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know, Hearts Alone, Blackberry Smoke's You Got Lucky, Stone Temple Pilots' Plush, Sevendust's Black, Guns N' Roses' You're Crazy, Foo Fighters' Times Like These, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Learning to Fly. Once again, you can hear all of these songs over on the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com. Now, like I said, I've been scrolling through this playlist, and I have a couple of songs that are listed as uploaded in my cloud status. And what that means on Apple Music is they're not available on streaming. So here are a few more that I like to consider the CD jackpot, physical media 1, streaming 0, and those are Billy Squier's The Stroke. It's on a CD called 80s Hits Stripped. He takes The Stroke and strips it down to a bluesy acoustic version. It's just a guitar and Billy's voice. You've never heard The Stroke like this before, and it is something that I wish I could have put on this playlist, but it's not on streaming, so honorable mention by far. I also want to give a shout out to Bon Jovi. I know Cactus Pete talked about Something for the Pain when he chimed in with this topic. I want to give a shout out to Living on a Prayer, the version that was done at the America A Tribute to Heroes concert that took place in the days following 9/11. They took the version that was Prayer 94 on the Crossroad Greatest Hits album in the 90s and stripped it down even more. And it is so beautiful. It is so well done. Given the moment that they played this song in, a few days after 9/11, just takes it to a completely different level. This is one that you definitely need to find the CD. The entire America Tribute to Heroes double CD set is worth the purchase. The fact that it's not on streaming, to me, as far as I'm concerned, is criminal. Bruce Springsteen's My City of Ruins, oh my God. You want to talk about a song that just pulls your heart out and shows it to you. That's a version right there. And then one other one that's an honorable mention, Evanescence's cover of Bananarama's Cruel Summer. You can only find that on the Bitter Truth CD if you bought it at Target. It's the Target special edition. There is a video version up on YouTube, and these three I will embed the videos of on the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com for you to check out, because I feel like these three need to be highlighted in this discussion. They didn't make the playlist because they're not on streaming. Boo on you, streaming services. Get these songs on there. Let people hear them. Physical media 1, streaming 0, like I said. With that, I want to thank Cactus Pete for chiming in with this really fun topic. I had a great time scrolling through this playlist. I've got about, a few hundred more, so I could definitely do a volume 2 of this. I'm sure you guys can too. I want to know what songs you would add to this Acoustic Remakes and Reimaginings playlist. myweeklymixtape at gmail.com or at myweeklymixtape on all the social media haunts. Let's keep this conversation going outside of the podcast, because everyone listening is just as much a part of the conversation as I am. And I am so grateful and thankful to each and every one of you listening. Once again, that Patreon website is patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. It's free to join, and there are different tiers if you want to support the show, but that is only if you want to. None of it is required. I appreciate all the support you guys show me and My Weekly Mixtape week in and week out. If there's a topic you want to hear on a future My Weekly Mixtape episode, email it to me, post it on social media, post it on the Patreon. Let me add it to this list. I want to be challenged. I want to be stumped. Let's keep this mixtaper conversation going week in and week out. My name is Brian Colburn. I thank you all for listening, and until next time, enjoy the ultimate acoustic remakes and reimaginings playlist. See you next time.